I'm not president of the Renal Association anymore, and it's a tough job being a registrar. It ages you. What I've found, and hopefully I'm going to build on your talk, Adrian. I'm not a medical registrar, so the first admission is that I'm not an expert in early warning systems. And there'll be many people in the room who are experts, and there'll be others in the room who know sufficient about this. So this isn't a didactic lecture about NEWS2, but it's really, a run through of what's all this got to do with the Royal College, the Royal Colleges. Well, we're delighted, to have NCPOD here, delighted to be, celebrating the 30th anniversary. And hopefully, things will go on for many, many years and decades for the future. So it's not to kind of show off to say it's our 500th anniversary. It's to point out that the object of the Royal College of Physicians is to provide the highest standards of care for all patients. And we do that by supporting clinicians mainly, with tools and techniques, and by supporting the people and the processes that come together to provide high quality care. That's our charitable object. That's what we're here to do. We're not here to look after the doctors, but the John Lewis philosophy, look after the staff and the staff look after the patients, I think is almost certainly true. This slide is sort of comes together from the Institute of Medicine book at the beginning of this century, Crossing the Quality Chasm. People may have read it or certainly heard of it, and it described the first 6 domains of quality. This college actually added sustainability in 2008, sustainability in the sense of green, and sustainability in the sense of our workforce and living within our means. So sustainability, I think, is a key to delivering high quality care, and as are all the other things. I attribute the quote to my boss in Salford, David Dalton, who certainly lives by the philosophy that quality should be the organising principle of the health system. And within quality, how we manage resource, how we address inequity, how we address social determinants, as well as how we provide the high quality intervention that delivers reliable, evidence-based, standardised care, because that's the goal. So you've seen this slide a minute or two ago, and the themes that arise are deterioration, critical times, handover, learning, how we become a learning system, how we have a culture that really embraces failure. You learn so much from failure. I'm learning all the time. It'd be good to have the odd success, I often say. But one learns when things go wrong, and when things go wrong in a non-critical fashion, that's great. But we learn from failures, and it's our job to deliver a good quality care today and learn something today so that tomorrow we deliver a better job, whether that's by asking research questions and answering those research questions, or whether or not it's quality improvement, and the same sort of characteristics are needed by a learning system there. And if we look at the evidence, there's a bit of difference between the percentages within this, but a third of ICU deaths suboptimal ward care, a fifth of ICU admissions avoidable, 40% of admissions better managed, and just highlight that in that particular report, nearly 600 avoidable deaths because we haven't recognised early enough, or we've recognised and not responded adequately early enough for something that we know is going to lead to a poor outcome in many cases. So some people say, why bother with the elderly? And I think, well, hopefully, because, we all want to be elderly at some point in time in the future. And the elderly pose a particular challenge, I think. The volume and the multi-morbidity in the elderly makes it really, really difficult job, for our medical registrars and for all of our junior doctors and for our senior doctors and for our multi-professional colleagues. If there's 4 or 5 serious things going on and interacting with one another, it takes a lot more time. It may be more complex, but it certainly takes a lot more time, even if one of those things isn't cognitive impairment as well. So the elderly are really, really important. Some of them are in really good shape. That's the Queen, who's certainly not looking elderly there, visiting us on our 500th birthday, and the President at the time welcoming her. You've just seen this vignette, and you can tell from the reference to NEWS2 that this is happening in a hospital near you, almost as we speak. This isn't an old thing from the past, from Galen's time. This is contemporary failure in an elderly gentleman who goes on to get acute kidney injury and dies as a consequence of that. And it's kind of not surprising with that severe acidosis and those sort of figures that has happened, but it sounds from the story that was avoidable. And I've not gone back to Galen because it would take us kind of too long, but if you look at this century all the way through, all of these reports highlight the same thing, the same themes coming of identifying people early enough, responding early enough, escalating the care, having conversations between senior clinicians who may or may not be elderly, and ensuring that patients are getting the right treatments at the right time. So we have an opportunity to speak the same language and provide a standardisation. Some people are afraid of the word standardisation. They think about robots coming along and AI and protocols. But it's really the opportunity to speak the same language and avoid the confusion of calling things by sort of a whole series of different Latin names or different processes in different hospitals. So we have this opportunity, and we're part way through that. It's a complex slide, really, just to pick out some of the things that have happened with the development and iteration of the National Early Warning System from NEWS1 to NEWS2, being able to now cope with hypercapnic patients, adding in confusion and delirium there, making the point that aggregation of scores is more important than the individual scores there, simplifying as best we can, and really to demonstrate that the whole system for ambulances, primary care, the whole system can deploy NEWS, and we can speak the same language across this continuum through intensive care admissions unit and to hopefully to successful discharge. The coroner's discussion there is an interesting one that I think most of us would wish to avoid. He said, when a consultant comes into the ward, when we start the assessment off from scratch. It's a very male-dominated discussion, this, isn't it? And why had he not checked Miss X's National Early Warning score? To which the doctor replied, I don't know, I can't answer that. And again, that's a contemporary quote. So we know that only 2/3 of the acute trusts, I think that's within England. Anyway, 2/3 of the acute trusts responded, are using an unmodified early warning system. Others have started to modify it. That then leads to risk when people work between different hospitals, and 20% are using different early warning systems, which I don't think we should be banning different systems, But if people are using different systems, and I think it's incumbent on them to study those systems and demonstrate that they're adding value in the iteration of our early warning systems as we go forward. Because clearly, there's a lot of harm that can be done by not understanding what's said between various parts of the system, not being able to measure things in a routine and standardised fashion. So, it's a common pathway of deterioration, and therefore there's a common pathway that we can put together, or a common process that we can put together for identifying risk of deterioration and codifying that deterioration and working out how we best respond today and how we respond better tomorrow with that. So this is some, I think, kind of frightening data from a study on sepsis. So 839 sepsis patients, 166 died, but of those 166, 126 didn't die directly from the sepsis. They died because they deteriorated, got organ system dysfunction and failure, and died as a result of not responding promptly to the signals of deterioration. Now, some of them may well have died anyway. We don't know. But it just demonstrates the scale of opportunity that we have to address unwarranted variation and to address amenable mortality. So if you look through the reports, the themes that come out, the issue of monitoring, the issue of recognising promptly, they're communicating, particularly at times of handover within teams, and then responding appropriately to reduce the scores or to move the patient to a better place of care. And we can use the NEWS system and processes like this to generate better learning for ourselves as practitioners, driving better outcomes for patients there. So right the way across that pathway, there's opportunities to learn. There are times that we can raise issues with our trainees, raise issues with our colleagues, and reflect on our own practice through that continuum and say, well, how am I going to do that better next time? What is this showing me for individual cases and for audit of cases there, so that we use the tools better and we identify areas that, well, it's not quite working as well as it might be here, the hypercapnic patient or confused patient, and then highlight that and work out together how we develop better systems, because no system is perfect, as we've just heard. And we can do this right across our health economies, not just within the buildings that we call hospitals, which are dangerous places, but out there in the community as well, and use the same kind of systems there. And this data is from the southwest, and the blue line shows on this run chart shows a reduction in mortality, modest reduction there in mortality over a period of time, whilst these systems have been deployed across the whole health economy. And the reason to deploy the same systems and speak the same language across the various individual parts of the system is to drive this cultural awareness that medicine's a dangerous thing, and that we can do things better, and that if we want to learn from things rather than attribute blame, then we can make considerable improvements to quality of life of doctors, but more importantly, experience of care and outcomes for patients, and experience for their relatives. I'll go through all of those elements. So the goal is high reliability systems, and we know high reliability systems have certain characteristics. People are preoccupied with failure. Find out if there's a problem, don't just brush it under the carpet. Think about how that might be fixed. Embrace that failure. Don't oversimplify things. Don't overcomplicate them. Don't call them 2 or 3 different things when we mean the same things. But embrace that complexity of the systems as well as the biology that we're managing and the treatments that we have. be sensitive to the operational environment that people are working in, and I guess within that we should also be putting human factors there. Think about how we build resilience into our systems so that we have fail-safes within there, and deference to expertise, not hair colour, so that we actually, people at the front line know better about things at the front line than somebody sat in the Royal College of Physicians or certainly in Whitehall. I think we'd probably all agree on the latter. So I think this is my final slide, and it comes from the themes work. So 25,000 cases, 17 reports. We should have, or we should use this national early warning system that we've got in place. No doubt we'll need to develop it and improve it over time. Whole series of reasons why we should do that, articulated there, that I won't read out for you. But it behoves hospitals, and I would probably extend that, I think it behoves health systems to have these kind of processes in place so that we can respond to the deteriorating patient and avoid avoidable mortality and poor outcomes. So thank you very much for inviting me.